Join lifelong Star Wars fans Lauren and Steph as they dive into the world of Star Wars fan fiction, discussing a new fic each month, breaking down the writing style, characters, canon relationship, and more. This is your source for Star Wars fan fiction recommendations. So come on and find out why it's one hell of a fanfic. Hi, and welcome back to One Hell of a Fanfic, where we cover a new fan fiction every month. With your host, me, Stephanie, and Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing good. We are more than halfway through summer, so I'm feeling fantastic about that.
I know we talked about it last time too, but how is the weather by you? Because I think I might die.
It's horrible. We're under a heat advisory. I'm doing nothing. I'm inside reading all day long. That's all I do. Which I guess works because we're covering a great fanfic today, so it's a good thing I've just been sitting inside reading all this time.
That's what I did today too. It's so humid. So the fan fiction we did this month was, like you said, it was great. It was called The Sith Who Brought Life Day, which didn't quite make sense to me at first, but it did eventually. So this fan fiction was made back in 2012. It's, what is that? 11 years old. It's been a while, and it's about 13,000 words, which means like 2.5 hours of reading, which was nice because I read it all today.
Yeah, I think I read it in 2 days. I read it in 2 sittings, a little bit yesterday and a little bit today, but yeah, it was a very pleasant read, and it's engaging pretty much the whole way through, which is crazy to say because there's some scenes that if I was to describe them, they would sound boring, like people sifting through records, but but it was actually engaging the whole way through.
And in tradition here, spice level, there was none. There was not a single romance in this entire thing. Not even mention of No, that's not true. There was mention of that one bartender that was shaped like a, what do they call it? A round blob.
I don't know if that counts as a romance, but I'll just give you that one.
So 0 on the spice level scale, unless you want to consider their lewd descriptions, I guess.
Of that poor bartender, yeah.
Yeah. So canon relation was divergent, or alternate. I never know whether to call it alternate universe or canon divergent, because sometimes some of them, when they're divergent, you can tell like everything's the same and then it diverts. But sometimes it's just like this one where you have no idea where it actually sits. It's just,
yeah, sometimes it's a gray area. I interpreted this one as divergent though, because to me it felt like very much it could be very at home in canon, other than like a very specific event that goes down differently than in canon, which we'll talk about in a minute once we get to spoilers. But for the most part, it feels very at home in canon, but then there is a little bit of a change at some point.
So what tropes did you find in here? I'm terrible with tropes.
My main one that I felt like was there's probably a name for this trope, which is escaping me, but losing a bet. And what I mean by that is like the events that happen in the story, the way that they're all kicked off is because somebody lost a bet. So somebody has to do something. And I feel like that's like, I would call that a trope because I feel like that's like a pretty common inciting incident, especially in comedy. So I count that as a trope in my book, at least.
I'm pretty sure that's the definition of trope.
Yeah.
What was this story about?
So the author summary, I will go ahead and read that off first. So the author summary is an Imperial officer loses a bet and has to get Darth Vader a present for Life Day. So that is telling us very limited information. So there's a lot more to that. And this story really surprised me in that way because I almost feel like that author summary is not doing this excellent story justice because it's just so short and sweet that when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, there's like actually so much more to this than I even thought. So I did just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But why do you think people should read this one?
Like we mentioned briefly, it is a comedy. We don't see that in Star Wars very much. Normally it's not even action, it's just drama. But no, this is a comedy, and we get this like rougher view of characters and who they are as like a base human. Normally when we see Imperials, they're very, I don't know, stuck up, and proper, and they have to stick to protocol here and there. But the characters we get here, we get this background view of their lives and who they are outside of just being Imperials.
Yeah, it almost felt like, I feel like in Star Wars, well, when I'm thinking of Star Wars canon specifically, there will be like comic relief scenes or like comic relief moments, but this whole story felt like almost like an extended comic relief. And then we actually do have like a little bit of a serious part near the end, but so much, it was almost like all of the comic relief in one story, which was cool.
Right. Now, it wasn't like you were laughing your butt off the entire time, but there was comedy to it all.
Yeah.
Ironic situations. And
yeah, like a little bit of like dark humor, I would say.
why would you read it?
Okay, for me, when I was reading this, I was thinking to myself that this fanfic is a really, really good example of, if you are someone who has thought about trying out fanfic, but you just don't really know what to start with, especially if you're like a longtime Star Wars fan and you're like, I don't know about this whole fanfic thing, and you're kind of skeptical of it, this story I feel like is a really good one to try out, because I think it would appeal to lots of different kinds of readers. There's a lot of references to canon that are really smart and like just witty and clever and just so well done, that I feel like if you're a longtime Star Wars fan, you'll appreciate that. And also, it's just like a well-told story, and the writing is very strong as well. So I feel like this is a really, really good first time fanfic experience for anybody that's thinking about trying it out. Okay, and at this point, we are going to talk about spoilers. So if you're thinking about reading this one and you don't want any spoilers, now is your time to turn back. I will say there is like kind of a little bit of a twist, you could say, that the author does not tell us about in their author summary. So if you want to experience that for the first time, beware, or I guess if you want to experience that for the first time as you're reading it, beware of this part, because we're going to talk about what that is.
Warnings aside, so what is this? Do you want to tell us about what is this story fully about?
Yes. Okay. So I will give like a quick little summary, and I'm going to reveal the twist now. So everybody prepare yourselves. Okay. So Oswald is an Imperial soldier, and that's the narrator of the story. And at the beginning of the story, he loses a bet with some of his peers, and they're all just sitting around drinking. They're bored. They're Imperial soldiers. They got nothing to do other than boring stuff. So they're giving each other these like crazy bets, and Oswald loses. And so what he has to do is, they tell him they get to choose who he has to get a present for Life Day, and his friends choose Vader. And so Oswald is like, well, crap, like how am I going to do this? Because this guy gets mad at everybody about everything, and he's going to kill me. So I need to give him like something that he'll actually appreciate. It doesn't take place too long after the destruction of the first Death Star, at least like close enough to that time to where Vader is still pretty obsessed with who destroyed the Death Star. And so Oswald is like, I'm going to find out who did it, and I'm going to bring this information to Lord Vader, and that's going to be like his Life Day present. So then I will still fulfill the bet, and I won't get killed.
Yeah.
And so what he does is he spends like, and this is the part I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, about how there's parts of this that you think would be boring, but I feel like the way that they were written, the author did a really good job of still keeping it interesting. He's looking through records. He's like looking at everything he can find. Eventually, he actually does track down that, okay, the guy's first name is Luke because he listened to the Yavin recording. Then he tracks down that he's searching all these different Jedi that might have survived Order 66, because he thinks maybe that's why Vader is so obsessed. Maybe there's a connection there. So he goes down this whole rabbit hole of looking at all these different Jedi, all these different names. Eventually, after all of this, he zeroes in on Luke Skywalker, and he brings this information to Vader. And then this is like the serious part of the story, is when Vader sees a holo recording of Luke that Oswald kind of like unearthed in these old Imperial records, he like kind of gets emotional, and he's like, okay, yep, that's our guy. And so because Oswald actually did a good job, Vader gives him he gives him Life Day off, so he gets to go see his mother for Life Day.
Which was so wholesome.
Yeah, that's
Throw that
really
in the
what he
wholesome
wanted.
scale.
That's what he wanted, was to see his mother for Life Day. So yeah, so that's the story.
Yeah, it was, and what you said before about how like it was, there's parts you would think would be boring, but they weren't. I loved how the author just guided you through what the character was, how he was researching it. And I know I was like reading and just like anticipating what the next thing was going to be. Who's he going to search next? Which Jedi will he pick? You could tell where he was going because you knew where the story had to go, but it was an
Yeah.
interesting way to get there.
Yeah, it was cool, like, kind of going on that journey with the character of, like, okay, he found this little thread, and so he's kind of pulling on that thread, and then he finds, like, the next clue, and then he finds the next clue, and so he's, like, going down this whole pathway until he eventually gets the answer.
Yes. And it's one of the things, the word journey is actually what I put into our show notes because the whole story felt like a journey. It wasn't, sometimes you read a story and it's like you know where it's beginning and going, and it's a story and it's very regimented in this way. But no, this really felt like it didn't putz or go too slow, but it wasn't too fast either. It was a journey through what this man's experience was. And it was, you got the glimpses of what he was thinking in his head and then what things going on around him, and just the way that it was written so well, even down to grammar and spelling, because this is fan fiction, and face it, fan fiction sometimes
There's no
it's not
editors
well
in
edited.
yeah.
Exactly. They have their like beta readers and stuff, and those are great, but
Yeah.
it's hit or miss whether or not fan fiction is a good, it's a good piece of writing, and this one really truly was.
Yeah. I guess I should say no professional editors, because I know some fanfic authors will get a whole bunch of people to give them feedback. So
Yeah.
no professional editors, but so typos and little mistakes and stuff like that are sometimes just part of it. But one thing that I really appreciated about this is that it was very, like, his voice, like this character's voice was very distinctive. Like, you could tell he's an Imperial as he's telling the story, and it stays that way consistently through the whole story. Like, it doesn't drop or kind of like end up changing at any point. Like, it's very well done from start to finish. So I thought that was like really well done by the author.
And then the other characters in the story had their own voices too, just through just the way they said things. And there's a lot of, most of these are original characters, I think. So you had him, and then his main, how did you put it in here? Oh, frenemy.
Yeah, his frenemy Calic, the guy that gives him the bet.
Yes. Who is just this, I love the way they describe all of the different characters and how they fit into the universe and the typical what a Imperial looks like or what they should look like. And they had little backstories on everybody, but it was just so smoothly done that you didn't feel overwhelmed by it. But yeah, Calic, he's something else.
Yeah, he's interesting, that's for sure. And then in addition to him, there's like just a bunch of drinking buddies that are just also at the table when the bet is made, but you don't really see them again, so they're not as crucial.
Right.
And then we do get a Luke Skywalker cameo, which that was also so well done. Like, this part had me laughing because the cameo that we get him in it's when Aswald is looking through old recordings and he sees that Luke at one point tried to get in touch about the Imperial Academy, like the Imperial Junior Academy, I should say. And in this recording, Luke is like trying to like explain why he's contacting them, but he's just like, you can tell he's nervous. He kind of doesn't know what to say. And it's just very much like a New Hope Luke, just very unsure of himself. And honestly, like, okay, I was laughing at this holo recording, but it made me a little sad too, because you can hear in the holo recording how desperate that Luke is to go anywhere else that he can.
Yeah. He wants to go off and be a fighter pilot and get off the rock that he's on, which is basically where we meet him. Even he's still kind of on that same journey of being bored in the space he's in.
Yeah. So that was a really well done Luke cameo. I mean, that's pretty much the only time we actually see Luke. The rest of the story is he's just being talked about. But when we do see him, it is very Luke, that's for sure.
It definitely paints that picture in your head.
And then we also have Officer Wire, who is Aswald's superior. So he's the one that basically is giving Aswald advice about like how to present this information to Vader and stuff like that. He's not a super big role, but we do see him a couple times. And then we see Darth Vader comes in at the end. And when Darth Vader comes on, this was another thing that I just thought was so good was he's when he finds out that it's Luke, he doesn't you can't see his face. You can't see the emotions on his face, but you can hear it in the way that he's talking.
You can also almost see it in the way that the author describes how things reflect off the helmet, or how the light shines in. He almost thinks he sees the glimmer of an eye.
Yeah.
The author does a great job at just explaining everything that Aswald is actually seeing or feeling, or anything else going on in the room.
So did you have any reactions as you were reading this, other than the stuff that we've kind of gotten into that we loved? Did you have anything else that you were thinking of?
So one of the things that really stood out to me is something that you kind of already mentioned, but the way that it touches on canon so much, but it's not in a way that makes you have to worry about like, do I know anything? Like, because like this is a very approachable fan fiction. You don't have to know a whole bunch of different things from the entire Star Wars universe. You have to have the basic sense of it, but they touch on things in such a way that makes it just seem normal. Or one of the things I noticed was how Aswald was talking about Luke wanting to become a storm, like he was just a couple 2 centimeters short to become a stormtrooper anyway, which like touches on that one, that it's like little things like that, but it's so just matter of fact and within character. But you didn't have to know that, but you like it just makes everything so much better.
Yeah, it's like a little throwaway line. I mean, although I guess you aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper. That's not really a throwaway line, but it's one line. But this fanfic still made a connection to that one line, and it does that all throughout with like just little references and stuff, which is really cool.
I also really loved, because I've never made the connection between Life Day and Christmas before. I don't know if it's meant to have that connection, but this fic definitely made the connection between Life Day and Christmas, and they treated it like it. And I don't know if you know this, but I love Christmas. We celebrate Christmas in July here, which was yesterday. Because why not have Christmas twice a year? So I love Christmas. So the fact that I was reading this the day after Christmas, it just made me extra happy. I still have a tree up right now. So one of the lines that I really liked was when Aswald was brought onto the bridge to go meet Vader. He makes this reference to the whole bridge had this magical stillness that I always associate with early Life Day morning. And that entire chapter was making parallels between how he woke up super early on the day he knew he had to meet Vader, just like you would as a child before Christmas, waiting for your parents. And like at one point he makes reference to, it's just me and the children waiting, like desperately waiting for this thing to happen.
I highlighted that line because I loved that line so much of like thinking about him, like thinking he's about to die. And then these little kids that just want their Life Day presents. And they're like in the same boat in a weird way. Just kind of building off of what you just said, just kind of like those little references and the sense of humor, which the sense of humor in this, as we were saying earlier, it's not like it's like slapstick or anything like that. It's very much more like, it's like dry, very dark at times, but just like the way that it's consistent throughout this whole fic, that really made an impression on me because it gave this fic a really unique tone that we do not see in a lot of fanfics. And I mean, there could be some other ones out there. If there are, I would love to read them because it was a really cool sort of like different vibe that we got from this one that I personally haven't read before. But yeah, and so in that way, and also the connection with, there also is this very important thing of who destroyed the Death Star. So like having this sort of light sort of material combined with this very, very important piece of information, I just really liked how those things like played off of each other in this story. Did you have a favorite scene?
Yes. My favorite scene was the very, very last line. He's gone to visit his mom. He gets to go back. And the very last line, I wrote it down. And it says, because apart from the occasional person who wants the name of a rebel Jedi Death Star destroyer, what most of us want for Life Day is family. And it just brought, after this dark humor, like not raunchy, but it was like written like a man. Like just they're playing sabacc and drinking and they got illegal things.
Talking bad about that poor bartender.
Right. It was just the beginning of this fanfic. I was reading like, what in the world am I reading? I feel suddenly like a man. No offense to men. Sorry, men, but I was like, this is a lot. But like at the very end, it just took this like wholesome turn. I was like, yes, that's beautiful.
That's true. So what would that be on the wholesome scale then?
It's low on the wholesome. Well, maybe this one line can be
Just
high
that
on the
one
wholesome.
moment.
The rest of it's not quite so wholesome.
And then, like, the thing that's messed up about this, too, is, like, he's happy that he gets to go see his mom, but the present that he brings her is, like, something that he got from impounded property, meaning that the Empire stole that from somebody. And then he's giving it to his mom. So then there's another dark thing in there right after the wholesome thing.
Right. But he's not telling her that.
Yeah, she doesn't need to know that. That would probably be upsetting.
Right.
And the other thing I loved about that line, too, is thinking about, like, when he's talking about, like, so he gave that present to Vader, and he says, apart from the occasional person who wants to know the name of the rebel Jedi Death Star destroyer, okay, that is Vader's son. So in a weird kind of convoluted way, Vader's Life Day present also had to do with family. In a messed up way. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even put that together. I was still just laughing at Rebel Jedi Death Star Destroyer. Which is a mouthful.
Yeah. But I thought that was really smart how it's like, and also, the other thing being that the whole reason that Vader even exists is because what he wanted was family and didn't get that, which is a sad way to look at that. But, the connections are there.
Yeah. Does that make it more wholesome?
I don't know. I think it's just, I don't know if it makes it more wholesome or less wholesome. I think it's just a neutral effect. My favorite scene, there was a couple of ties. So the first of all, the thing I already talked about, which is that holo recording of Luke, because that little holo recording, it made me feel a lot of different things as I was reading that part, which, that's good writing, because all it is Luke just babbling about some stupid stuff that's not even relevant to what the Imperial Academy even wants to know. But you can see in the way that he's speaking, like you can just see so much about where he's at that time. So that was the first favorite thing. Other favorite thing was when Vader finds out about Luke is the one that destroyed the Death Star, and when Vader's watching that same holo recording, he's like feeling emotions. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. And then so that was a great scene as well. And then my other favorite thing, which I have to read this quote because this made me laugh. So in this story, there's a lot of references to other Jedi, one of which being Yoda. And the description of Yoda just had me laughing. So this happens when he's talking about just different Jedi that he's looking up to try to get any connection to the guy that destroyed the Death Star. And he's talking about how Yoda is like a green troll of a thing that went by the single name of Yoda. He's 900 years old, 0.66 meters tall, indeterminate species. And he says, why His Majesty hadn't removed the almost 2 decades old, presumed living and dangerous alert placed on a relic of a being who couldn't see over the average end table, I had no idea. The Emperor could be very mysterious at times. That just killed me because it's like, Yoda's like this totally powerful Jedi, you know, like the only person that could even really hold his own against the Emperor at all, I guess, other than Vader, of course, later on. But like, and the way that the way that he sounds on this record, just based on his description, and Oswald is like, what is this guy like? Why is this guy even in here? It just made
Yeah.
me laugh.
The
So
descriptions of anything in this, just the perspective change from what we normally see in Star Wars, because we normally have the light side perspective versus the Imperial side, is it's eye-opening. And I loved that about when we read the story of Finn. We got to see that side of things, and this story too. And we talked about it back then where from a certain point of view, that the couple of books they have, I don't know if no one's read those, definitely read them. They're fantastic little short stories. It feels like it would fit right into that book.
oh, 100%. I was thinking the same exact thing. It feels like, honestly, I even liked this better than some of those. So, I mean, that's that's saying something because there's some really good ones in there. But I
And
feel
there's
like
some
this
really
one,
silly ones in there too, like the mouse droid one. Just
yeah, there's some good stuff in there. Some of it's serious, some of it's silly, but this story would totally be at home there. So I 100% agree.
so, do you know how Vader actually found out Luke Skywalker's name?
Yes, from in the comic, he was told by Boba Fett.
Right.
Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker. Yeah, okay. So we're thinking the same thing. Okay.
So did you prefer, so anyone who hasn't read the Vader comics, so this story came out in 2012. The Vader comics didn't cover how it actually happened until 2015. And I think it's like comic book 6 in the main Vader series. It's been a while since I read it.
Yeah.
It where basically Boba Fett comes back with the knowledge and he just gotten a name. And that is about it. Did you read those ones at all?
I did read it, but it like you, it has been a while. I also am behind on the Vader comic as well. But
Same.
yeah.
It's so long.
I need to
Well, it's
catch
shorter than the main series, but
I just wanted to warn you in case you had any follow-up questions about the Vader comic, but
main question, did you like this better or the way it actually quotes happened?
okay, to my memory, in the Vader comic with Boba Fett, isn't it just a very much like we don't get details as to how Boba Fett even got the name. We just know that
Right.
Boba Fett has it, right?
Yeah, he like came back from a mission or something and he kind of failed except he got a name.
Okay. So I do enjoy how in this story we're actually seeing the process of where the name comes from. Because I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, Boba Fett, if we're comparing it to canon, like, Boba Fett could get the name, but like, I mean, Boba Fett could find out anything probably. It's like just not as fun. It's just not as like, let's try a little harder to, you know what I mean? Like, let's come up with a
Yeah.
backstory. So, is that how
They
you
do
felt?
make up for that in canon when they go on with like the Afra series and they're looking into Luke. That I think that makes up for the lackluster like discovery of Luke's name in canon. But this way is so much better. Like as you said, there's actual backstory and there's a story and a journey to it compared to just like I did get a name, sir. Here it is.
Yeah, and we're learning about Luke through this journey as well
Yeah.
because of what he's uncovering, which was cool. Like that made it a lot. There's a lot more. It's just like a much richer reading experience than just like, oh, Boba Fett found out because Boba Fett can do anything. Okay. Speaking of like digging through records and stuff, okay, so I was comparing this to after watching Andor. So in Andor, remember when Cyril is like, he's like obsessed with trying to find out about Cassian Andor.
Yeah.
And he's like looking through the records. He's searching. And then Dedra gets mad at him and is like, what are you doing? Like, stop like using your time. Like, stop searching Imperial records for this guy. And he gets like in trouble for doing that.
Yeah, I remember that.
So like, okay, comparing that to this story,
yeah.
do you think that Oswald could have gotten away with like doing this much? Because his boss for a while didn't know that he was doing this digging. Do you think he could have gotten away with all that?
No, there was definitely some suspension of belief. like, or whatever it's called, where like you're just like, okay, well, this had to happen this way. I mean, it was in his job title to kind of to like dig through information because he was a comms officer that did encoding, like was supposed to be decoding all of the rebel information that came in to try to find information on Luke, basically, or what the rebels are doing, and then they'd send it up higher to get all kind of put together. So this was kind of in his job description, but really, like, they were like, "Oh, you're doing this thing? That's silly. Well, I guess keep doing it." And in canon, though, that wouldn't have happened that way. But maybe because they're on some remote ship that.
Also, his superior did not seem to be quite as much of a butthead as Dedra, so
It's true. And
that
like
probably
this
also had something to do with it.
and this fic also brought up how like women were not allowed to be even in the Imperial Army except for some really high profile people. So maybe if we were to use that in canon, we're to say, well, maybe she really had to like prove herself and be extra grumpy.
Oh, dude, and that's real. That is a real thing because of the pressure. So I could see that. I actually could see that.
Yeah.
And also Cyril was like being if I'm comparing this to Andor, Cyril and Andor was being creepy. This guy was just kind of slacking off. I do think there's a difference.
There's definitely a difference.
So maybe he could have gotten away with it. Maybe he was like better at handling this type of stuff than Cyril was. So.
And they already talked about how that the higher ups just assumed that they were all either gambling or looking at inappropriate images on the interwebs.
Right.
So it's already an established thing that the officers apparently do.
Right. Okay. Well, my last question for you. Did you think that Aswald actually supports the Empire, or did you feel like he was just kind of there because it was the only job to do?
He definitely supported the Empire. The way he talked about everything was just so, well, yeah, of course. Like, and these like rebels out there just messing everything up because his dad was the only time I got hints of him not liking the Empire, for example, it would just be when him and his parents lived in some peaceful, I don't know, beach town, and then the war happened, and then his dad became higher up, and then so now he's following in his dad's footsteps. But he definitely speaks through the entire fic, just like, well, yeah, we're making peace in the galaxy, and these rebels are messing it up, and if I could get my hands on them.
Okay, see, that's interesting because I thought the opposite.
Really?
I thought that he was just kind of like there just because it was the job. I felt like he just didn't care. I didn't think he was a rebel or anything like that, but I just thought he didn't care one way or the other, and this was just the job that was available, so he enlisted. But I mean, I noticed that same thing that you did though about when he's talking about his childhood home and he's like talking about how lovely it was, and then he says that was before the Empire.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that really tipped me off, but to me, it made enough of an impression on me to where I was kind of like, huh, maybe he's just kind of here because it's the only thing. But I don't know. I think it could be taken in different ways, though. Should we talk about what we're reading next month?
Yes, you picked it this time. What are we reading?
Okay, we're going back to Reylo, y'all. So, everybody, hold on to your pants, hold on to your seats. We're going back to Reylo. We're going to be reading Black Gloves, Orange Soup by Solia. And there is, this one is flagged for adult content, so just beware of that going into it. It's probably going to be a high spice level. So that's just, check the author tags before reading. And quick little snippet of what this is about is they're communicating through the Force bond while Rey is trying to fix a lightsaber. So that's going to be interesting. We'll have to see where that goes. Also, don't forget, we do have an Instagram, which is one hell of a fanfic with a period in between every word. So if you want to go check out what we're going to be reading next month. If you want a little reminder, we post all of that on Instagram. And we also post our recordings on YouTube as well. So our channel on YouTube is called One Hell of a Fanfic. So if you like to watch video while you're listening, then we're on YouTube as well.
And pretty soon here, I've put up if anyone knows what Telegram is, it is a chatting, it's an app where you can chat through, and it's encrypted on both ends. It's a good one for chatting, and is great for group chats. So I'm getting that all up and running. So if you ever want to come out and talk to us, I will get that up on our social media.
Oh, sweet. That sounds cool. Okay. We will see y'all next month, and
may the 4th be with you. Of course. Gosh darn
it's
it.
July.
We're fine.
Okay, we will see y'all next month. Bye, y'all. Thanks so much for joining us at One Hell of a Fanfic. On this podcast, we discuss Star Wars fan fiction, but we do not own the rights to Star Wars or any of the written works we cover. We have no affiliation with Lucasfilm or the fanfic authors we credit for their work. For questions, please email us at onehellofafanfic@gmail.com.